Hello everyone, my name is José Vasco. I'm the Director of the Office of Investor Protection and Assistance at the Securities Exchange Commission of Brazil. I'd like to welcome you all to the World Investor Week Global Webinar on Investor Resilience. World Investor Week is an IOSCO worldwide campaign to raise awareness of the importance of investor education and also to disseminate key messages on investor education and protection. The campaign 2022 is covering topics such as investor resilience, sustainable finance, crypto assets, frauds and scams prevention. This webinar will discuss financial resilience of retail investors in the context of the current ever-changing global markets. By gathering different perspectives from regulatory, international, and financial industry, this webinar will be a forum for debating the challenges that lie ahead for consumers in times of rapid change, with new and emerging risks, but also great opportunities to access finance and plan for the financial future. So we will cover those close linkages between financial resilience, financial literacy, and financial inclusion, and analyze the importance of robust financial consumer protection frameworks. Our invited speakers will debate some recent trends affecting Main Street investors, such as the growing interest in alternative investments, the gamification of retail investing, the use of social media and digital platforms to promote investor opportunities, and also the rise of retail traders amid increased market volatility. This event will also explore the importance of financial planning to navigate this changing financial landscape and how investors can evaluate the emerging risks, socioeconomic, environmental, geopolitical, misconduct, and financial fraud within the context of investors' long-term investment goals. Today, we will have presenters from 3 continents, and I'd like to thank all colleagues that are taking the time to join us today and contribute to this important discussion for investors. So today we will have Miles Larbe, who is the head of Financial Consumer Protection Unit at Oecd. Our colleague Mary Head from the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy at the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Also, another colleague from C8, the Committee 8 of IOSCO, Maria João Teixeira, Director of the Market Conduct Supervision and Investor Department at CMVM Portugal, Andrea Middel, Board Member of FPSB and Partner at DURF Financial Planners, and Dante Gori, the Head of Stakeholder Engagement at FPSB, an important organization and supporter of World Investor Week that every year organizes the World Financial Planning Day. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us this webinar and give the floor to my colleague, Miles. Miles, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vasco, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody joining this webinar. It's my pleasure to be here to support this event and to support World Investor Week, organized by IOSCO every year. It's a terrific initiative to bring attention to the importance of planning investments and finances. My name is Miles Larbe, as Vasco said. I'm responsible for financial consumer protection at the OECD. If I could get my presentation. Voila, perfect. And what I'm going to do today in my presentation is talk about some of our research and policy work in the area of financial resilience, and how that informs our global standards on financial consumer protection and the role of financial consumer protection to support financial resilience of consumers and retail investors. So just to begin with, to sort of set the scene, so to speak, The OECD is an international organization of 38 member countries, but we work with many, many other countries around the world and international organizations, including, of course, IOSCO and FPSB. The OECD's mission is to develop better policies for better lives across a number of policy domains. And in the area of consumer finance, which is where I work, that involves financial consumer protection, financial education or financial literacy, and financial inclusion. And this slide here really is designed to set out the way we approach this area, this policy area. We see that financial consumer protection, financial inclusion, and financial literacy are really interrelated policy agendas that work together or complement each other in order to achieve or to support an objective of financial well-being of consumers, of families, of communities. And when I say financial well-being, I'm also encompassing in that elements or the concept of financial resilience as well. So in terms of financial resilience, what does that mean? Well, financial resilience, I should perhaps first of all say, is essential to financial well-being. We see it as a sort of a part of and also an input to financial well-being. This slide, which has been distilled from our research and policy analysis, sets out, I guess, a definition or a sort of an approach or framework, if you like, for understanding financial resilience. You can see there on the slide that it's sort of briefly defined as the ability to resist, cope, and recover from negative financial shocks. But the rest of the slide, the rest of the framework shows the different inputs or drivers, shall we say, of financial resilience. And I think what's important to point out here is that there are some of those drivers or factors where an individual can influence their sort of the situation that they find themselves in, or perhaps their level of financial resilience. So, for example, their level, their engagement in personal finances and their levels of financial literacy. But there are, of course, many other factors that are relevant to a person's financial resilience that are not in their influence or control, that sit in the external environment and, of course, impact on a person and can affect their level of financial resilience. So that includes sort of environmental factors such as the economic environment, or importantly for this presentation, the system of financial consumer protection in which they're operating. So the conditions that they find themselves in when they're engaging with financial products and services, but also the incidence of what we call here negative financial shocks. So things that may be unforeseen that happen to a person. And this takes us to the idea of the role of sort of financial planning, I suppose. But, for example, loss of income through a job loss, a health issue, or some unexpected expenses. All of these things can affect a person's financial resilience. And of course, we saw that perhaps in a very sort of significant and systemic way through the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I'll touch on in just a moment. But just to provide a bit of data, the OECD, we collect a lot of data and do a lot of research to provide evidence to countries to help them with their national approaches and also to guide international policy development. So this slide draws on some research that we conducted in 2020 to look at the levels of financial literacy and financial well-being and financial resilience amongst the adult population. The research was conducted across 26 different countries all around the world. And this slide shows some of the aggregated results. And what we can see here is that levels of financial resilience before the pandemic happened were already sort of were sort of fairly low in some cases. There were some areas where people had greater financial resilience. For example, about 50%, over 50% of people around the world said that they would be able to cover a major expense. Whereas on the other hand, we saw indicators of lower financial resilience. For example, how would people manage if they lost their main source of income, and would they be able to cover ongoing living expenses for at least 1 month. And there you can see that, at least 10% of people said that they would not be able to manage in that situation. What we found through our research is that there is a positive correlation between financial literacy efforts, so efforts to encourage people to be more confident and informed in their financial dealings, between greater financial literacy and greater financial resilience. And that holds true in respect of knowledge, behavior, and attitudes. I think that we all know that improving financial knowledge is important and useful, but it's really how that is and can be translated into behaviors that's probably the most important part of that equation. So it would be impossible to talk about financial resilience without talking about the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that that has had on consumers and societies and economies all around the world. So at the OECD, we did research. We surveyed 120 organizations from 80 countries to look at the effect of the pandemic on financial consumers and the sort of responses or the sort of measures they were putting in place in terms of financial consumer protection to protect and support consumers who would otherwise be facing financial hardship or increased financial resilience. So on this slide, you can see some of the results of that research, which show the risks to financial resilience that were particularly highlighted as a result of the pandemic. And of course, no one on this call, I'm sure, needs reminding that the pandemic and in some cases, obviously the effects are still with us, was characterized by shutdowns, loss of income, loss of employment, furloughs, and so on. So it was countries told us that the risks to consumers included reduced financial resilience. This was the highest category risk for low and middle income countries and the second highest for high income countries. Increased vulnerability to frauds and scams, which of course, falling victim to a financial scam effectively shatters someone's level of financial resilience. And also an increased concern about levels of financial exclusion, due to lack of access to financial products and services. As I said, we asked countries what sort of measures they were putting in place to support financial resilience during the pandemic. And some of these, I'm sure, will be familiar to people on the call. And the most common measure that was put in place was arrangements to assist consumers who were experiencing financial difficulty or financial hardship as a result of the pandemic. And I think the most common form of this was in the form of loan repayment holidays or credit moratoria. They're called different things in different countries, but measures that were put in place to allow consumers who were suffering from reduced income or reduced revenue to be able to pause their repayments, particularly on home loans and mortgages, as a temporary measure to basically address the financial hardship that was being experienced as a result of the pandemic. So while the pandemic, of course, was a sort of a temporary or a sort of a temporary phenomenon, and one that, of course, we are still coming out of, and we're all very much looking forward to that. Some of the lessons and issues that were highlighted in the experience of the pandemic are, of course, give us longer term lessons, as I say, to be built into policy development going forward. And this is where I want to mention the G20 OECD principles on financial consumer protection, which are the international standard for consumer protection frameworks around the world. There are currently 10 principles that set out the foundation stones of an effective financial consumer protection framework. And they've been endorsed by the G20, by the OECD and the FPSB, but they're applicable to all countries and all sectors of the financial services industry. And so these principles are designed to guide countries as they develop and implement their own financial consumer protection frameworks. The principles are 10 years old, and so we are actually in the middle of doing a review and update of the principles to see how they've been implemented, but more importantly, to find out, are there sort of developments or gaps in the principles that need to be addressed so that they are forward-looking and continue to reflect global best practices, including experiences, as I say, and lessons that we learned through the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic. So on this slide, the update is happening. It's been underway for the last 18 months or so, and we're nearing the final steps now. And on this slide, I can show you the updates to the principles on financial consumer protection. So on the slide there, you can see the changes, or rather the updates that we're making to these principles. Firstly, to add a new principle on access and inclusion, and another new principle on quality financial products. There would also be 3 new cross-cutting themes focused on digitalization, sustainable finance, and financial well-being, which is, of course, where we are talking about today, financial well-being and financial resilience. And so these new principles, these updated principles, are in the final stages of endorsement by the G20 and by the OECD, and will be ready to be distributed and implemented from probably the end of the year onwards. And I think on this slide, I can show you some examples from some more specific examples from the principles about how financial consumer protection can support financial resilience of consumers. So I mentioned access and inclusion. That's an important principle. And this involves a number of things, but for example, addressing the barriers that may prevent consumers from accessing and using financial products, but also making sure, and this is very much, as I say, a lesson that was picked up from the COVID-19 experience, financial inclusion and access also makes sure that consumers who are already in the financial system can remain included, for example, if they experience temporary financial hardship. And as I said, most commonly that could be, for example, if a consumer needs temporary assistance with meeting loan repayments or loan commitments. Another really important area where financial consumer protection frameworks can support financial resilience is through the application of equitable and fair treatment of consumers. This is one of the principles that I just mentioned. It's also a feature of many, if not most, countries' financial consumer protection laws and regulations, treating customers fairly. However, that's integrated into the framework. And of course, that includes, and this is specifically highlighted in the updated principles, includes consumers who may be experiencing vulnerability. And again, that was something that we saw in the experience of COVID-19. And I think one of the things to consider there for financial consumer protection regulators and supervisors is this concept of what makes a consumer vulnerable is actually quite a nuanced and sophisticated area of policy or thinking. And I think we need to recognize that vulnerability can arise for consumers at different stages and in different circumstances. It's not the case that a particular group of consumers should be deemed vulnerable at all times. It's that people can experience as they travel through life, and particularly if they experience things that are outside of their control, that can make them vulnerable even for a short time, where some of these issues may be relevant for them. And finally, quality financial products, which I already mentioned, the importance of the design, the distribution and the governance of financial products so that they are designed to meet the interests and objectives of target consumers and contribute to their financial well-being. This is a new element of the updated principles. And I think it's really important because it demonstrates that, while disclosure and conduct requirements are incredibly important, there is also it's also very important to ensure that the underlying products themselves are consumer-centric and designed to meet, to contribute, as I say, to the financial well-being of the consumers that they are marketed to. So that's my presentation. Thank you. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of certainly from the financial consumer protection angle, how that's connected to and supports financial resilience, as I say, of consumers, of families and communities. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. Back to you, Vasco. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miles. Great points. I think that's, I'd like to highlight the positive relationship between financial literacy and financial resilience, and the role of financial resilience may play on financial well-being. I think you presented very important insights for policymakers and financial supervisors on those interrelated policies to support financial well-being and financial resilience. And I think this is a challenge for financial regulators so we need to use different combination of policies and tools to effectively educate, protect, and provide access, financial inclusion to investors. I think this is a great transition for our next speaker, Mary Head from United States SEC. As we all know, the United States is the world's largest economy by gross domestic product and has by far the largest share of the world stock markets, being home to over 60% of the total world equity market value. So what happens in the United States does not stay in the United States. It's very important for us also. I'd like to hear from you, Mary, your views on investor resilience. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasco. And thank you, Miles, for the information. It was very informative. Before I begin, let me state that the views I expressed this morning are my own and not those of the Commission or its staff. I work in the SEC's Office of Investor Education, and we connect with retail investors in 3 ways. 1, we respond to investors' complaints and questions, thousands every year, and we have had a big uptake over the last year or so. 2, we have a team of lawyers, subject matter experts, who write the retail-facing content that we post on investor.gov, our website for individual investors. 3, we conduct investor outreach with an emphasis on new investors, women, the military, and underserved communities. In keeping with the themes of this year's World Investor Week, we designed our messaging around investor resilience. Given current economic conditions, this topic could not be more timely. Investors are dealing with high levels of geopolitical uncertainty, inflation, and market volatility. So what does it mean for an investor to be resilient under these conditions? Most define resilience as the ability to withstand and recover from financial shocks. Investors need a plan for short, medium, or long-term decision-making, as the case may be, that has the flexibility to adapt and weather changes in an uncertain future. The pandemic was a wake-up call. A 2021 study by the Stanford Center on Longevity found that about 1/3 of American families could not cope with a medium financial shock even before the pandemic. Then the pandemic came along. The pandemic changed the way we looked at the world and how the world worked. As a forthcoming IOSCO report states, the pandemic raised concerns about the vulnerability of investors across all age groups, particularly in the context of social isolation, commission-free trading, and an increasingly digitized world. There were high levels of market volatility, more investors trading for themselves, the gamification of investing, an increased reliance on social media for advice, and an increase in fraud and scams. Some of these trends predated the pandemic, but most were accelerated during that time, and they will continue. So as we appear to be emerging from the pandemic, although under continuing economic difficulties, This is the time to remind investors about the benefits of becoming more resilient. This slide shows you the changes in the retail landscape. Retail trading has grown exponentially. Investors are online, and half of U.S. retail investors last year were completely new to the market. They are younger, more racially and ethnically diverse. They have lower incomes and accounts. They trade frequently, and they display lower financial investing knowledge than more traditional counterpoints. To mark World Investor Week, we issued a bulletin on investor resilience jointly with the CFTC, FINRA, and the New York National Futures Association and state securities administrators. The bulletin offers some very basic steps for investors to consider. Individually, none of the recommended practices is new. These are messages that we all continually emphasize and re-emphasize. I think they also make a lot of sense, even in today's modern digitized world. They still have relevance. And taken together, though they are very common sense steps, they provide a framework that we hope will help investors achieve resilience. Even World Investor Week's messaging about resilience will hopefully raise investor awareness. So very briefly, let me run through the points we made in the bulletin. Next slide, please. Emergency fund. This is money set aside to cover unexpected expenses. Having an emergency fund for 3 to 6 months of living expenses is often the first thing on the to-do list for financial well-being. But for many people, especially those living paycheck to paycheck, this is easier said than done. Next slide. Diversification. Again, this is not a new message. Diversification reduces overall investment risk. You can diversify among asset categories and between asset categories. Investors might also think about investments that may perform differently under different market conditions. And of course, many investors achieve diversification through mutual funds and ETFs rather than individual stocks. Next slide. Don't expose yourself to losing more money than you can afford to lose. All investments have risk, and in some cases, trading on margin with options or short selling, you can lose more money than you invest. Next slide. Do your research. Before investing, do a background check on your investment professional. Make sure they are licensed or registered. Approximately 3/4 of our retail-facing cases have involved an unlicensed investor professional, or the promise of unrealistic returns. Second, verify that the investment professional is who they say they are. You may have to call the phone number they give or look at the website they promote. Given the growing number of impersonation cases we see, this additional step is important. Fraudsters have very sophisticated techniques to fool people into thinking they are legitimate. If people get a letter purportedly from the SEC, we encourage them to check with us first. And third in this category, review the investment's disclosure documents and don't make the mistake of relying on testimonials or celebrity endorsements. Finally, watch out for investment fraud. We know that retail equity trading has grown exponentially since the pandemic. And where there are investors, fraudsters will follow. Investors are online, they are social, and many are relatively affluent. On the other hand, scams are cheap, they reach many potential victims, and they have the potential for anonymity. A FINRA Investor Investigation Foundation study on financial fraud found that 8 in 10 respondents have been solicited to participate in a potentially fraudulent offering, with 11% losing a significant amount of money. As I mentioned, we have seen an uptick in investment fraud and scams. In addition to more traditional forms of pump and dumps and Ponzi schemes, romance schemes, impersonation, and crypto scams are contributing to investor losses, which total in the billions every year. We can estimate that at least in the United States, losses range from $20 to $50 billion annually. The romance scams are so prevalent that the FBI issued a public service announcement cautioning investors. Social media is the platform for fraudsters to contact vulnerable people. And there's so much personal data online that it's not extremely difficult for fraudsters to approach vulnerable citizens. The fraudsters appear to be genuine, caring. They pretend to make plans to meet the victim, and even some have proposed marriage. They point the victim to a apparently lucrative investment opportunity, often in the crypto area, and encourage the victim to invest. Initially, they are allowed to show a profit and to make small withdrawals. But as the fraudster puts more pressure on them to continue to make investments, they begin to be puzzled. And when they finally stop or run out of money, the fraudster disappears. And in an instant, they have lost their earnings and their savings. Now, I thought you might be interested in seeing some of the come-ons that my colleague Owen Donnelly has found that run afoul of the red flags of fraud. So in the first case, you can see that he is talking about making $100,000 in interest a year. The next one. Here we see the guaranteed excessive profits, and here this purported fraudster is advertising a scheme that's 100% risk-free. Next, please. Here again, they are holding out the promise of huge gains, $500 a week, earning you almost $10,000, and $1,000 a week, earning you $1,600 weekly. Next. And this one is my favorite one. They are advertising an investment opportunity, even in a bearish market. So those are just some of the examples. And now I want to show you a video that we publicized just this week for investor investment. And so if you'd play the video, please.
My program has changed people's lives. Let's check in with one of my newest members who's made over $100,000 in just a few short weeks. Hey, Rich, how's it going?
Awesome! I've made $1,934 in the last 10 minutes. We'll be millionaires by the end of the year. My name isn't really Rich. It's Dylan. I'm not a real investor. In fact, the How We Trade program is completely fake. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's Office of Investor Education created these videos to show you what real scams look like. There are a lot of fraudulent promotions on the internet trying to get you to invest your money. I'll walk you through how to spot red flags of fraud so you don't end up becoming a victim of an investment scam. I'll also tell you about steps you can take to better protect yourself.
Hey, Tom McWardle here. I'm an investment pro.
Let's stop right here. Is he really an investment pro? Type his name into the search box on investor.gov to find out if he's licensed to sell investments. Most con artists are not.
And I've made my clients millionaires. Do you want a new car, a new house, a life of luxury?
Looks fantastic, right? This is how they try to lure you in. They show you a bunch of luxurious images and tell you this could be yours. The truth is, only the fraudsters will be enjoying a life of luxury after they steal your hard-earned money. Promises of great wealth are a red flag of fraud.
You can earn an extra $500 per week guaranteed. And more than 65% of our accounts earn $10,000 a week after 12 months in the program.
$500 a week guaranteed? Likely $10,000 a week after 12 months? Don't trust anyone who promises you will make a lot of money with no risk. The only place you'll find high, guaranteed returns is in an investment scam. Every investment has risk. Generally, the higher the returns, the higher the risk. You could even lose all of your money. Most fraudsters spend a lot of time trying to convince investors that extremely high returns are guaranteed or can't miss. Stay clear if you hear anything like that.
Now, there are a lot of scammers out there posing as experts.
This is a common tactic fraudsters use. They try to make you think they're genuine by telling you to watch out for other people trying to take your money.
After getting my MBA and working at top financial firms all around the world.
If this guy has an MBA, then I have 3 PhDs, which I don't. Fraudsters tend to make up or exaggerate their credentials. They may try to build credibility by claiming to be with a reputable firm or have graduated from a prestigious school. Don't invest with someone just because the person claims to have an impressive background or track record.
I'm only giving access to the first 100 subscribers.
Many fraudsters try to pressure you to invest right now, claiming that only a certain number of investors can get in on it. Or they may tell you that the offer will disappear in a matter of hours. Don't let fraudsters play on your fears of missing out. Do your research and take your time to make a decision on all investment opportunities. I've made $1,934 in the last 10 minutes. Fraudsters love to create a buzz and use fake testimonials to convince you that others have invested. Don't be fooled by actors, like me, pretending to be real investors. And even if a movie star, professional athlete, or celebrity claims to have made money, it still isn't a good idea to make an investment decision just based on that. The next time you see an over-the-top sensational video trying to get you to invest, remember these 3 things. 1. Look for the warning signs of fraud, especially promises of great wealth, high guaranteed returns, and pressure to invest right now. 2. Check the seller's background on investor.gov. 3. Take your time researching any investment opportunity. Before you invest, investor.gov.
I hope you enjoyed the video. The point here is that none of the steps that we emphasized in the bulletin and the points that are made in the video are basic. They have relevance for investors, I think, no matter the conditions of the world or whether you're a digital investor or not. They all go together to make sense. I just want to wrap up by acknowledging the close relationship between financial resources and financial literacy and financial resilience. Investor education is a key part of efforts to raise investor awareness of resilience, and the challenge is always to make investor education engaging and effective. Coming up with creative and innovative investor initiatives, thinking about the best way to reach investors, and identifying the most effective channels of communication to reach targeted groups are all part of the work of investor education. Evaluating the effectiveness of our programs is another important part of the job. Overall, our mission is to help investors make better, more informed decisions and to avoid fraud. And this will also help to make investors more resilient. Thank you.
This is great, Mary, and thank you so much for presenting the recent changes in retail investors landscape in the United States and sharing information on some cases and examples of red flags. I think it's impressive that in such a developed financial market, there is still room for such an impressive growth of retail traders numbers. In just 1 month, more Americans download an investing app than the total number of retail investors in equity markets in Brazil. So this is huge. And I want to let you know that your website, the Huawei website, inspired us to launch a similar website in Brazil. And we got a 20% conversion rate. So 20% of the internet users that landed in that page, in our page, try to invest or to get more information about investing, and they were using all the same tactics that you share with us. So this is a global phenomenon. And thank you so much for sharing also your insights. With that, I think I'd like to move to another market, now in Europe. And I'm pleased to have you, Maria João, from CMVM Portugal here. Please let us know what's happening in Portugal, in Europe, to promote investor resilience.
It's a great opportunity for me to be here and for CMVM to also present what we're doing in Portugal. In fact, this is a global market. You will see some similarities from what we have just heard from other markets. And in fact, that's why in the C8 from IOSCO, we share this kind of experiences. Vasco was just saying that we can learn from each other also in the way that we do financial education. Yes, thank you. And also, so I am heading the Department for Market Conduct Supervision and Investor. We have this area in CMVM, so we are the capital markets regulator and supervisor in Portugal. So I'll try to do some, give you some information about what we're doing throughout my presentation, where I will cover 2 different main areas. One, I would like to highlight some aspects of the new investment reality coming from digitalization, and also the more recent global trends that we are seeing in the global context. So I have a presentation. I will try to share it with you. I hope you can see it now. Okay.
Yes.
It is. Okay. So again, we are in the World Investor Week. CMVM has been in the coordinating that week for Portugal since the very beginning in 2017, being a member of the C8 again. And it's been quite successful too. So, and a good opportunity for us to give some messages for investors, to cover the main topics for investor protection. And it's a very intensive week where we try to do that work. And it's been growing in impact in the number of investors and number of initiatives. Of course, we have 11 partners, different associations, the central bank and other authorities that help us to spread the message to many segments and many publics. So it's been very interesting. So it's good also to be here with all of you, I mean, a more global space. So, excuse me. Okay, so starting with the new investment reality, I thought under the financial resilience topic that we are covering here for the investor, I think it is worthwhile to talk about what we are seeing now as the way investors, namely retail investors, how do they trade and how do come to the market nowadays. And this has to do really with two main aspects that I'd like to highlight. One is the digitalization and new business model that arise with these e-channels, the possibility of using digital platforms with very easy access, low cost in some cases. You even have zero cost offers from some platforms. We also know there's other situations can arise with that, as the FOF, payment for order flow, that we have heard in the last year or so. And also we see the rise of social media and the influence of the social media in the investment space. We have investors relying on the information provided from influencers in the social media. We have the sense of community that we have in the social media is also important and influenced the way investments are chosen and the way investors act and trade. Of course, gamification was also mentioned by Mary and Miles before. It's something that is attracting more investors to the market, make trading fun and easy, and through apps and mobiles, very easy to start trading with gamification. And we also see the access to alternative investments, as some of you have mentioned before. Also, we have lots of new joiners in the market interested in investing in crypto assets, which are, of course, in many markets, as in Europe for the moment, unregulated space. So we'll have the markets in crypto assets regulation coming next year in a phased way, starting with the asset reference tokens and e-money tokens to be regulated, but it will be a progressive introduction of regulation in Europe regarding that. But for the moment, we see lots of new investors being attracted to invest in crypto assets. And of course, it's out of the competence of CMVM and other European regulators, so we need to highlight that to investors. Another enabler of this new investment reality, in fact, was the pandemic, the COVID-19, the lockdown that it enforced people to do, and also we still have remote work, and I believe forever that will be continuing to have that. And with that, it comes, namely from the lockdown, more savings. We have seen in Europe an increase in savings from families. So more money because no traveling, no restaurants, so some more money to invest and more time to do that. So that's a tendency that we are seeing, and it helped this new reality of investments. So we see some opportunities in this new context. We see coming from this new way of trading. We see new investors in the market. We have seen retail orders volumes increasing a lot from 2019 until this year. And we have seen that retail proportion of investment is increasing. It increased just in 1 year from 2019 to 2020, 10%. And the average volume that of the retail investor also increased 10% in that year. And we also see that the big percentage of investment is really on shares. It's in the equity market that really interests these investors. We have seen an increase of investment in shares of 80% from 2019 to 2020 in Portugal market. So, this has been done mainly through e-channels. We have seen an increase of the e-channel proportion from 55% of the orders to 70% of the orders. So we see traders more and more trading through e-channels and not so much in the traditional way to send orders to their financial intermediaries. So we have young investors new in the market, and they look for internet information. They look for information in the internet, in social media sometimes, many of them, the young ones mostly. And so this has been good for the market in the way that we have been able to capture more investment in the capital markets to finance the economy. So it's important. And on the other side, I also see an opportunity for these new e-channels to also help us, to the financial intermediaries and also the regulators, to provide and to ensure that the product information comes adequately to the investor. So you can have the disclosures in the internet sites, you can have on home banking of the banks, you can test the profile of the investors. In a simple way, you can ensure that in a simple way, the information of products will be accessible and easy to understand to the investor. So it's an opportunity also that comes from this digitalization. So it helps us also to communicate with impact with investors, to reach more investors, and to send financial education messages also to the investors, which is a difficulty for us to reach as many investors as possible. Of course, with these opportunities also some risks come, and we have the influence that the social media makes, and some of these investors are not very experienced too, and they tend to follow influencers, to follow the social media community sometimes, and not checking the information that is being received from there. And they tend to invest also, some of them, in the short term, and not to diversify very much the investments they do. Also, they can be influenced by behavioral biases, and with influence, excess of confidence, or also the fear of missing out, the FOMO, behavioral bias that sometimes happen, to be wanting to follow the community and what they see in the social media being done, and not to have a rational and thoughtful way of considering the information. And also, it was mentioned before that fraud and scams also come globally to all the markets. The digital channels also allow for it to come easily and to be assessed easily by all the globe. And we have seen that the more than 40% of the claims we receive in CMVM are of business that has been proposed by non-authorized entities, and more of 20% may be fraudulent situations. So it's something that risk that arises also with this new reality. So in terms of another risk that I'd like to highlight here is that if the investors has a bad experience in acting and trading in this market, he may lose the confidence on the market and avoid him to be an investor for the future. We have seen many cases of people that have bad experience in trading and then will not come back to the market, which is something that should be avoided. Also, the digitalization may have the risk of digital exclusion for people that are not so much acquainted with the digital channels. So this is something that we would need to work on. So what is the regulator's role in this area? So in CMVM, of course, we have, and namely in the department that I'm working on, we give some investor support. So we receive claims, requests of information from investors. And this is very powerful tool for us, because we try to be as close and as open to receive communications from investors, because it helps us to analyze and to identify risks they are that they have when they trade, and also vulnerabilities they have in what they do. So this will help us also to plan our supervision on the conduct of business of the entities that we supervise, financial intermediaries mainly. And also we help them also to solve their claims with the service providers when they have a good claim on what they are arguing. So, and the other layer is, of course, supervision that we try to do in a preventive way, and to be also proactive in supervision that we do, and also, of course, in the corrective way. So financial intermediaries will treat customers fairly in what they do, and we try to avoid situations of mis-selling with the supervision actions that we do. And the third layer is important, is of course financial literacy and financial inclusion, which is very important for the financial resilience of the investors, which is the topic of this webinar. And for that, we need to communicate with impact. We use different channels, we use different formats. We have our site. We tend to be quite proactive and with messages to the investors. We produce videos, animations, and so we try to find ways that will capture more the attention of the investors and make our message more attractive and really to be heard and followed by the investors. We have different areas that we've been covering in our financial education tools. The fraud area, of course. We also issued some tips to young investors. We also posted some recommendations regarding market volatility and the way that investors react to that. On the sustainability area also, because there's new regulation in Europe regarding the ESG factors communications to investors. And in fact, since August this year, financial intermediaries are obliged to ask investors for their ESG preferences before they do a recommendation. This will be for investment advice and for portfolio management that is done for investors. They need to, financial intermediaries need to ask the investors for their preferences. So this is something that we also are worked on in terms of communication for the investors, because it's quite new in the market and we need to be sure they understand what they will be asked for. So this is some examples. I'm afraid I cannot show videos or information. They are in Portuguese, so I don't think that, apart from my friends Brazilian, you would not be able to follow that. So coming quickly to the recent change in the global context, the other topic that I mentioned I would cover. Of course, we are seeing some economic and geopolitical changes recently since the beginning of this year. The monetary policy has changed, so no further liquidity injection by central banks. This had an impact in the market. Also, some disruption in the distribution channels of goods that we have been seeing, and the increase in energy prices. All of these brought inflation, which is quite new for the younger investors. They are not used to see inflation and to work and to invest with inflation. And they don't have sometimes, as I mentioned, the long-term perspective that will also protect them from the inflation impact. Of course, we also have another topic that is important in the global context presently. It's the sustainability that I just mentioned before. So in fact, what is the impact of this new context that we are facing this year, where we are seeing that markets are going down after the maximums upon maximums in the stock exchanges that we have seen until last year. Now we are facing some decrease in the market, so we are facing market volatility. we have been seeing lots of investors making sudden decisions of selling. And with that, we have received many claims in CMVM regarding from investors that were claiming that they did not knew that the investment fund, for instance, they were invested in at risk. So we also see and understand that, and so we did produce information about the importance of them reading the documentation of the products. And this is some work that we're doing also in financial literacy, because an inquiry that we did recently identified that only 1 in 4 investors read the documents of the product before they invest, because most of them say they rely with the recommendation that is being done by the account manager or the financial advisor. So, and they also, of course, suffer from behavioral biases. All of these, of course, and protects the investor and the financial resilience they have. And the inflation also has an impact in the capacity of the investor to be able to face his expenses and to do his investments. So what we've been doing regarding these challenges, more recent challenges, is to make some recommendations again regarding the importance of knowing the risk profile and the financial situation before making investment decisions. Try to find good investment advisors, to check the information sources, to read the product documentations, try to understand what they are investing in and not to invest in if they don't understand, and to prefer to make long-term investments, to diversify, that was said before, and consider the inflation impact in the expected return of the investments, which is also an important topic. So we try, and just to conclude, we try to have an open channel to investors and to communicate with impact, to be close and to provide some financial education that will help investors with their investor resilience to the financial situation and economic situation that we are facing. And with that, I would end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria João. Great to have an overview of the recent trends in the investment landscape in Portugal and Europe, and also for covering some recent changes in the global context that are also true for the region. I think we can see developments that are similar to what's happening in other regions, and with retail orders volumes increasing, and also more access through digital channels, and a growing number of investors that are new in the market with new risks to be addressed by regulators. I think Mary's slides and your presentation speak volumes about the similarities among different markets, and also speak for the importance of collaboration, such as this campaign, and also all the work of Oecd and IOSCO. So thank you so much. And coming back to our agenda, we will continue with the perspectives of the market professionals, and particularly with the financial professionals who have direct contact with retail investors. For this, I want to welcome Andrea Middel, who is also based in Europe, but also connect with a global perspective as a member of the board of FPSB. So we are, Andrea, we are a really international group, so please excuse me if I mispronounced your name, and please correct me if I did that. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vasco. And thank you to IOSCO, and in particular to the Securities and Exchange Commission of Brazil for organizing this webinar during World Investor Week to address the important issue of investor resilience. And thank you also for inviting me as a speaker and panelist today to share my thoughts and more practical thoughts, I think, about this topic and the key role financial planning has in people's lives. My name is Andrea Middel, well pronounced, Vasco. I serve as a board member of FPSB, the Financial Planning Standards Board, and I'm the chairperson of the Professional Standards Committee. I'm a certified financial planner myself, and I'm a partner of DURF Financial Planners, and it's an independent financial planning company in the Netherlands. When we talk about investor resilience, I see this as a shared responsibility amongst regulators, the financial industry, and consumers, investors themselves. Regulators focus on consumer protection and market regulation, and in an ideal world, the financial industry delivers transparent products and solutions recommended by reliable and competent advisors. And in that same ideal world, consumers understand their financial situation and know which financial decisions suits them best. And the more vulnerable consumers are, the greater the responsibility we see for the financial industry and the regulators. In that shared responsibility of regulators, financial industry, and consumers, financial planners play an important role. Globally, more than 200,000 financial planners in 27 countries and territories are certified by the FPSB and can be recognized by the CFP designation. FPSB is a non-profit organization that establishes financial planning as a standardized profession in the interest of the public. FPSB has developed a framework for CFP certification that integrates competency, ethics, and professional practice standards for financial planning, along with requirements in the areas of education, assessment, and ongoing competency. And at this moment in my presentation, I first wanted to share with you more details about FPSB's standards to make clear to the audience, to you, how competent, skillful, client-centered, and integer certified financial planners worldwide are. But I thought, well, maybe it's a little bit boring for you and for those who are not so enthusiastic about financial planning as I am. And it's going to take a lot of time to walk you through all the detailed documents about the standards. So I thought maybe it's better to tell you a more practical story, a real-life client story that could have happened anywhere in the world. But first, I want to eliminate a misunderstanding about financial planning and maybe also about investing. Many people think that financial planning is something for rich people. And I'm convinced, and I see it in my own practice, that financial planning can help everyone. In our day-to-day business, we see people who are wealthy as well as people who are just getting by. And in both cases, it's our goal to help them to make solid financial decisions that suit them. Well, back to the story, and let me introduce you to Mel and Jan, both 45 years old. And they came earlier to me this year, and they are quite a happy couple, never had serious financial questions. They both enjoy their jobs, and they have two teenage children. Well, a middle-of-the-road family we have all over the world, I guess. And they sometimes manage to save some money, but often spend it, especially when traveling the world. And Mel's parents passed away last year, and she inherited about 200,000 euros. And they have had never so much money in their bank account, and it brings stress and discussions in their relation. Mel wanted to pay back the mortgage. Jan heard about some interesting and attractive investments, and maybe the red flag investments of marriage. I don't know, but he wanted to invest, and Mel wanted to pay back the mortgage. Together with them, we prioritized their goals, and after an intense meeting, we found out that the first priority was to save for college fund for the children, 20,000 euro each. Next, after a few years of COVID lockdowns, they wanted to enjoy a big family holiday worth also about 20,000 euros. And the rest of the money, about 140,000 euros, was intended to enjoy a comfortable retirement and, if possible, an early retirement. And after determining their goals, I reviewed their financial situation. How much do they earn now? How much pension is accrued? Which assets and loans do they have? How much can and will they spend and save? What's their risk tolerance, etc. And in the next meeting I had with them, I presented the results of the analysis and showed them the feasibility of their life goals in different scenarios. saving, investing, paying back the mortgage, retire at 68, which is the designated retirement age in the Netherlands, or maybe earlier at 65, and maybe saving or investing additional funds to make an early retirement possible. Let me try to share my screen with you to demonstrate how we can show different scenarios to clients. And I may try to make a quite simplified scenario, but it's just making clear how financial planners work in advising about investments. And don't be afraid, when I share my screen, you don't see a real client. I made a mock account for Jan and Mel. I'm going to share my screen with you. Share. And here you see in the screen the analysis I made with them, and this is their current situation. I analyzed their incomes. You see it here: their pension, the pensions they accrued, the income, their house, their savings, and their mortgage. And when we look at it here, we see the budget, which is the budget now and after they retire, and we see here red after retirement. So the income is going down when they retire. Well, they inherited some money, so maybe they can use that for their retirement. So I made a few analyses. Analyze one was saving the heritage, the 140,000 they had, and saw that when you put the money on the saving account, you have the first about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your retirement. It's able to withdraw from the saving account because there is no interest on the saving account. So that's maybe not enough. Then I show them a scenario when I said, well, if you pay back the mortgage, that was the one that Mel wanted, pay back to your mortgage. It means that you can save or invest more because there are less expenses, less interest to pay, so you can save more. But still, it's only just in 1, 2, 3, 4 years after retirement that there is enough money for them to withdraw from. I looked at investing the heritage, and I made an assumption of a growth rate of 3%, and we saw that it's much longer they can withdraw from the investments. And at last, I made an analysis for early retirement. Imagine they stop working at 65. We see they have to withdraw earlier, but they have to spend now to save or invest much more. So they can spend less. So this kind of scenarios we have when we talk with clients. And in the analysis and meetings with Mel and Jan, I made clear that they need to make a return on their, I think the sharing my screen has stopped. That's okay. The analysis meeting with Mel and Jan made clear that they need to make a robust return on their investments to achieve their life goals. And if they were to pay back their mortgage, it would reduce their monthly expenses, but the money would be locked up in their house and not available for a retirement income. They found out that talking too much about money and investments brought a lot of stress in their relationship, so I spoke with them about investing in a passive way. That way, they could let their investments grow without having to monitor it constantly. And also, they both wanted to make wise decisions with the money, since the money came from an inheritance. I spoke with them about the basic principles of investing, the connection between risk and return, the connection between investment choices and their investment horizon, the difference between a defensive portfolio with bonds and a more offensive portfolio of stocks, etc. And we ended up with the following advice. They inherited 200,000 euros and keep 60,000 euros in a savings account for the big family holiday trip and the college fund for the children. The investment horizon is too short to invest that amount of money, and the rest of the money, 140,000, has a long horizon of about 20 years until retirement and can be invested in a well-diversified portfolio of stocks. When they get older, we can reduce the investment risk gradually. And with this advice, it seems feasible for them to have a comfortable retirement from the age of 68. If they want to retire earlier, they have to spend less now and invest a monthly surplus. In the end, they decided not to save extra now, since they are now in an expensive phase of their lives. Well, this story maybe shows how financial planning works. Before making investment decisions, think about life goals and priorities. Make a financial plan and stick to that plan as long as the goals and the personal situation remain the same. And we monitor, along with our clients, their financial plan in order to keep their life goals achievable. And so it transfers from a financial plan to financial planning. And just a simple story, and I thought maybe it's more illustrative to tell a story than walk you all through the standards to show you the process of financial planning and how financial planning can play a key role in protecting consumers from taking too much risk or not affordable risk. Thanks for your attention and for the invitation again, and back to you, Vasco.
Was great, Andrea, for sharing, I think, for giving such a vivid description of a real life story of an investor. I think we regulators interact with investors in different moments. Sometimes with investor education before they make a decision, and after a problem happens, or so in this case, when we are handling with complaints, I've been working on this department of investor assistance for 15 years. I have the feeling that since that I'm similar to a medical doctor working in a hospital's emergency room. So the role of financial planners in between the investor education from regulators and the problem, so supporting investors with advice is really key and crucial. So thank you so much for sharing your views on this topic. And I think this is the perfect moment to invite Dante Gori from FPSB to give the perspectives of the profession. Thank you, Dante, for joining us today. I know it's difficult for you for being today due to other circumstances. And thank you so much for joining us from Australia. I think it's almost Saturday there, and it's a lot of efforts to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasco. And again, I echo Andrea's comments in welcoming and having us here on the panel. I'm with Financial Planning Standards Board, and it is Saturday morning here in Australia, and I'd like to share a little bit about briefly, just in terms of the role of professions, I think in terms of supporting investor resilience and investor protection. And I think all the comments that I've heard today have echoed the fact that what we're trying to do here is support consumer investors to make decisions, providing them the opportunity to navigate through all the noise that is there, which I call the internet, the noise that is around them, to be able to make informed decisions that are appropriate for them. And that's very difficult. And as much as I think there's an opportunity and a goal to try and prepare consumers and investors to be able to make those decisions on their own, the reality is, of course, there is a big role for not only regulation, but also the role of professions and professionals to support consumers in that decision making. And the mission for FPSB as a global standard setting body for financial planning is, our mission is to benefit the public by establishing and upholding and promoting worldwide professional standards in financial planning. And Andrea is a classic example of that in terms of being in practice and is certified. So there are many, I've heard the other speakers today talk about investment advisors or distributors or intermediaries as part of the financial services landscape. Not all intermediaries or distributors of products or sellers of products are in fact professionals or abide by a profession. And I think that's what's really important here is for consumer and for investor resilience, is that they know where to turn or who to turn to trust, whether that is the regulator websites to be able to identify someone who is licensed and registered to actually sell financial products, but also to be able to check in with a professional body that actually upholds or certifies an individual to ensure that person is also subject to the norms of that profession. And so as an example, I think, through FPSB Limited, we're across 26 territories around the world. Each of FPSB affiliates are professional bodies in those respective countries, and those professional bodies certify individuals. So again, as I point out, not every investment advisor or financial product seller is a certified financial planner, but indeed all certified financial planners are licensed and regulated in their respective territories. I also thought I'd share a little bit in terms of what CFP professionals have been hearing on the ground from investors and from their clients. And again, this echoes many of the comments that have been raised tonight as well. But we did a survey of CFP professionals early this year in response to IOSCO's paper regarding investment trends, looking at crypto assets, social media, etc. And what was quite interesting is that the demand. So I think everybody and all markets have seen an explosion in demand since COVID. In terms of people being at home, accessing digital platforms, accessing or wanting to be part of the latest digital innovation of products such as crypto assets, as an example. And CFP professionals have been overwhelmed. Over 55% of respondents said that they had received demand from their clients about investing in crypto assets. But interestingly, only 9% of those who responded, CFP professionals, said they were able to or did provide advice on crypto assets. So as you can see there's already a mismatch between the demand from investors about wanting to access products such as crypto assets and the ability for professionals to respond. And so why didn't they respond? Why are CFP professionals not responding? The number one reason was that they were not licensed to do so. So their firms or their employers, all the licensing arrangements in their territories didn't permit them to provide advice on crypto assets. Because why? Crypto assets in most territories, if not all, are not regulated financial products. And so therefore there are big risks in respect to professionals being able to provide advice directly on those. So again, there is this mismatch in respect to demand and supply of trained professionals. So where have they turned to? They've turned to, which again I think was echoed in some of the other comments, to others, people who are filling a void in the market. We saw that great video from Mary from the SEC in terms of how people are utilizing social media to attract investors, social media influencers. If I'm not wrong, I believe in recent days, the CEC has also penalized Kim Kardashian in terms of sort of crypto asset publicity on her social media. So, we can see the heightened demand from the public for interest in these products and the use of celebrities and social media influencers to sell them. And indeed, again, going back to that survey, 70% of CFP professionals said that their clients went ahead and purchased crypto assets, even though they couldn't provide advice on them. They went and sourced that information themselves. They went and either were influenced by some other party and invested in their own accord. And again, the results told us that 62% of those that invested on their own lost money, have lost or suffered a financial loss. So again, I think it's very clear to see that there is, this void in respect to providing advice and services on these products is leading to investors making decisions on their own and suffering a financial loss as a result of that. And again, this is something that we need to really consider I think, collectively about how do we bridge that gap in combination of regulation, but of course with professional service providers like CFP professionals. And I think in terms of, if I could turn now just very quickly, there's been a lot of talk about investors and some of the data and trends about what they're doing. We knew before, and the impacts of COVID, we knew before COVID that many consumers were struggling to be able to meet their financial needs. We knew from research, or we know from research, this is even before COVID, that most consumers didn't have a financial plan. And so what I'll end on at this point is saying that I think one of a very simple objective I think we have collectively, and this is echoed through World Investor Week and World Financial Planning Day campaigns, is that maybe not everybody can access a financial planner, even though I think they will benefit, as Andrea said. What's really important is that everybody does have a plan, a financial plan. Because the one thing that we know for sure is that if you fail to have a plan, you're effectively going to plan to fail. And I think that's a real key message for all of us here, that irrespective of your situation, circumstances, or geography, I think it's imperative that collectively we encourage and aim that all investors have a plan before they invest. So I'll pause there. Vasco, thank you very much again for having me on the panel.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you so much for your perspective of FPSB. I think it's really, your presentation and with Andrea complemented the previous one from Miles and the regulators. I think we are all working on the same direction with the same mission, but with different roles. And World Investor Week actually is an example of collaboration, not only among regulators, but also with professionals and the market participants. So we are really short of time, but I will try to have one or two questions, and I would ask my colleague Miles from Oecd if perhaps he can briefly speak about the role of financial consumer protection to support financial resilience.
Sure, thanks Vasco, thanks for the question, and compliments to all of the other presenters. I think that there's some really interesting presentations and fantastic examples. So I think when we talk about financial resilience, as I said in my presentation, I think there are elements of financial resilience that an individual can control or influence, but we need to be mindful that there are elements that are outside of their control, that they have no influence over at all. And I think that, we've heard some terrific examples of campaigns of investor education, which are very, very important in building up confidence and knowledge and awareness. And of course, the important role of financial planning and people seeking out the advice of professionals to help them to plan. But as I say, I think alongside that, we need to remember that we need a strong and effective financial consumer protection or investor protection framework. So that involves having oversight bodies, such as the SEC, of course, that are able to oversee the market and take enforcement action where there is misconduct. It involves having complaints handling arrangements that consumers and investors can access. It involves, frankly, treating customers fairly and responsibly in terms of how financial services providers deal with them. And then, so all of that is needed to build and to support financial resilience. And then, as I was highlighting in my presentation, even more specifically, or thinking about resilience, particularly looking at where it's appropriate to have enhanced protections for consumers who may be vulnerable, for example, or designing products that have customers in mind, and flexible arrangements to support consumers in financial hardship, particularly, or I guess where we see this particularly is in relation to credit and debt arrangements, or for example, insurance arrangements, where if consumers are experiencing hardship, they may need some temporary variations in contracts to help them, particularly where that hardship is associated with a temporary situation, such as a loss of employment or something like that. So yeah, I think the financial consumer protection piece is very, very important to supporting financial resilience and working alongside these other interventions where perhaps individuals have got more autonomy or control to support overall financial resilience and ultimately financial well-being. Thanks, Vasco.
Thank you. I'll try to have one more question. I know Mary is quite concise. Could you say a few words about priorities of US SEC for investor education, Mary?
Yes, thank you, Vasco. I would say that in terms of our investor protection priorities, keeping in mind that we are a disclosure-based regulatory scheme, the Commission is looking at emerging asset classes, crypto, of course, and complex products, the digital engagement practices that are aimed at retail investors, and some private fund regulation. Now, in terms of investor education, we are dealing with the effects of the increase in retail trading. And there are positives about this, of course, in terms of more participation in the markets. But it also creates challenges in education. The lack of long-term planning, the effects of gamification, where overtrading is typically unsuccessful, and the meme stock phenomenon, which is not likely to lead to positive results over time. Crypto, as the regulatory and disclosure space becomes more defined, there will be a need for a lot of investor education about that, and fraud will always continue to be an issue. In terms of the only other thing, the ESG, interest in ESG in the US is increasing, but it is a complex space. And really that will be one of the focuses going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And I think now we need to close the webinar, but I'd like to thank you for your input. I really like your presentations that collectively form a dense layer of information with many thoughtful insights. I think there's a lot of work ahead, and it's particularly for cooperation, in my view, between IOSCO, C8, and OECD on investor resilience and financial resilience, the connection between the concepts. And I think this webinar provides us with a lot of insights to think and plan for the challenge that we have to deal with in the years ahead. Thank you so much. And for the audience, this webinar, the video recording will be available on the web page of World Investor Week. Thank you so much, and have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world now. Thank you.